All right, thanks everybody for taking the time to dial in today. I see we have a couple of callers here, so I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me and that everyone mutes your lines when you dial in, just to make sure that there aren't any disruptions during the presentation. Just to get us started here, I just want to talk you guys through the what this looks like for the meeting today. We have two presenters that'll be on to give us a little bit of an introduction into project development. One who is active in the industry, and then we have someone who is new to the industry who was a previous participant in the collegiate wind competition. And then after each of their presentations, you'll all have an opportunity to either send a chat message to me and I can ask the presenters the questions for you, or just unmute yourself and then ask the questions directly. After this presentation is over, we will share the recording with everyone. And if you do have any follow-up questions that we didn't have the chance to get to during the presentation, we will pass around any contact information, or you can just reach out to us and we'll ask those questions for you, just to make sure that you guys have as much information as you need to look at what the career paths are for project development. So now to get us started, Toby, I don't actually see your name on the list here, but I just want to confirm and make sure that you're on the line. Toby, are you here?
Howdy, yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. All right. So Toby, do you want to just give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and then go into your presentation?
Sure. So I'm Toby Butterfield. I'm a senior project manager at EDP Renewables, working on development stage wind and solar energy projects in the Western U.S. That's kind of my region. I have been in the industry about 10 years now. I graduated college in 2009 with a degree in applied physics, and kind of made my entree into the renewable space doing energy assessment, which I'll cover a little bit later, for DNVGL, what is now DNVGL, which is the large sort of independent engineering firm within this space, and at the time was called Gardasan. That was a highly technical role, and it was a good way for me to get some initial exposure to the industry, but it wasn't a perfect fit, and kind of made a transition from there into project development, and have really enjoyed that and haven't looked back. So I've been working for EDPR, which is the fourth largest independent power producer in North America and globally, for the last, let's see, 6 years or so now. So pretty strong background in project development, and excited to talk to you all about that. I think the world of independent power providers is one of these spaces that, whenever I tell people, I live in Portland, Oregon, and Vestas has their U.S. headquarters there, and that's, a big wind turbine manufacturer, the leading wind turbine manufacturer in the world. And whenever I tell people I work in wind or in renewables, they go, "Oh, do you work for Vestas?" I go, "No, I work for EDPR," which nobody's ever heard of. The independent power producer space is this kind of funny zone where, the energy industry generally kind of underlies our entire economy, but it's for most part kind of invisible to people, and especially on the independent power producer, independent power provider front. So, this normally, if we were all in a room together, it'd be great to kind of solicit a hand raise or something on how many people are familiar with what IPPs are, but I'm just gonna proceed and assume that, like most people who are outside the industry, that you probably are familiar with the general concept of like regulated utilities, the people who buy your energy from, and like wind turbine manufacturers like Vestas, independent power providers. Essentially what they do, it says right here on the slide, is they develop, construct, and operate projects. So sometimes in some jurisdictions, utilities will like to own and operate these projects, but historically that has not really been the case, especially you look back 10 years ago, wind projects were kind of new tech at the time, and utilities, being rather risk averse, did not want to own and operate them and bear their operational risk. So the model that the utilities preferred was for somebody else to step in with expertise sort of in this specific space of wind, or now solar, sort of renewables more generally, and operate these assets over the long term. So all IPPs are defined by their revenue stream, which comes from the sale of energy from these projects to some kind of a utility generally, or a commercial and industrial customer. So you run your wind project or your solar project, and for every megawatt hour, that's the unit of energy you push out to your customer, they pay you a certain unit rate. So that's like the very abstract, high-level version of what an IPP's revenue model looks like. Now, of course, there's a lot behind that. There's different business models. Some IPPs don't do their own development. Some do. I'd say at this point, most of the big players in the space do. EDPR does. So development is kind of the early stage of a project's life cycle. You've got to decide, where should this wind project be? Where should this solar project be? What utilities are likely to purchase power in the future? Where is there a demand for this product that I'm going to be selling, this energy I'm going to be selling? Where is there a good place for it? Is it windy here? Is it sunny? Is the ground suitable? Is it really expensive? That kind of thing. So that's development, and that also includes all of your environmental study work, going and getting all the permits that you need, working through a transmission grid interconnection process that's highly technical, kind of electrical engineering related. There's a power marketing element to that. There's a policy element to that. It's highly strategic. Doing energy assessment or resource assessment, where you try to use meteorological data to estimate how much energy a plant will produce in a given location. That's a big part of that early development stage stuff too. So that's what I do, development. That's sort of the project, that's the part of the project life cycle I exist in, and I really enjoy it. It's a very jack of all trades, master of none type role. Every day is a little bit different. You're constantly learning stuff. You get exposure to every aspect of the industry, and you really get to understand the economics and the financials that makes these projects tick, and what causes some projects to get built and other projects not to get built. So it's a wonderful role where, if you really want to understand the nuts and bolts of the industry, because it's not a specialist role, development is a good place to do that. But there's all sorts of specialist roles that tie into this as well. On the construction phase, you've got civil engineers, you've got electrical engineers, you've got people who are sort of, if you go and work for, I don't know how many of you, I guess, I'm in Colorado right now, and the CWC is hosted by NREL, which is in Colorado, so Colorado's on my mind. There's a firm here called RES, and they are primarily a construction firm, and you can go and work for them and do kind of construction management, schedule management type stuff. On our side, we tend to contract to those firms, but we've got people on our end who manage those contracts and ensure that the schedule is being kept and all the various plates are spinning, because during these construction projects, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen all at once, and it all has to sort of tick and tie to each other and then sort of move in sequence. Generally, this is the phase during which financing happens. So there's a lot of interaction with financing partners, typically big banks, to come in, and they have to close their financing by the time the project goes live at the end of construction. There's a lot of important capital procurement that happens during this time, purchasing and negotiating the purchase of wind turbines or solar panels, as well as all the appurtenant stuff, the underground cabling, the trackers and collection. And then during the operations phase, you've got at sort of the really boots on the ground level, you've got wind turbine technicians and electrical technicians working on solar projects at a slightly more abstract level. You've got people who are managing these projects as financial assets and ensuring that they're performing and that all the permitting and legal obligations of the projects are met. You've got people working in performance analysis, looking at, hey, we've got these old wind turbines that are 10 years old. They've got 20 years left on their useful life. What can we do to ensure that they keep running efficiently, or maybe even boost their output? You've got people working in supply chain management to make sure that all the spare parts that the sites need to keep running efficiently are there. You've got people working in 24/7 sort of high voltage control, what's called a ROC, or a regional operations control center, because these are critical infrastructure for the U.S. You've got to have people like operating them all the time and coordinating with utilities to make sure that the safety of the electrical grid is maintained in the event that something happens at our project or at a different project that affects the grid in our area. So that's a lot, but I sort of I didn't want to assume familiarity with the IPP business model or what it is we do. I guess the takeaway from this is, compared to some other firms in renewables, IPPs have really broad scope, right? Because we're involved in the entire life cycle of these projects. So that means, in my opinion, like, really interesting work, and there's lots of different types of roles within an IPP. So, I'm sure there are people on the phone who are focusing more on engineering. I'm sure there are people in environmental type majors, maybe some people in accounting or finance, maybe some people in more generalist type roles. And I think that there's sort of a home in an IPP forward a little bit here, is that there's a lot of opportunity to move around between roles at an IPP, so you're not necessarily getting pigeonholed into one thing. I started in energy assessment, which is pretty technical, and then moved into development. And one of our directors of project management actually started his life as a settlements analyst, someone who is essentially, it's kind of like an accounting type role, making sure that bills are paid on time, basically, to our landowners. And he moved from there all the way up into eventually becoming a director of asset management, and then moved over into project management, which is kind of like a construction management type role, making sure that things are getting built on time. So he's moved around a lot just to kind of keep things fresh and keep learning. And there's opportunity to do that within an IPP, which is really great. So, I kind of covered a little bit what types of roles exist already. I've kind of broken them out here as sort of generalist roles versus technical roles. And there's sort of some other type roles. Obviously, legal is a big part of what we do. There's accounting necessary, the sort of back of the house type stuff. Real estate legal is a really big part of what all IPPs do. Ultimately, the development we're engaged in could be thought of as essentially a highly specialized branch of real estate development. So obviously, real estate attorneys are an important part of that. And I'm sorry, how much time do I have here? I want to make sure I'm not blowing way over.
You're doing fine. We've got a full hour. You can have at least 20, 25 minutes.
Okay, great. So I guess I'll try to leave a little bit of my budgeted time for questions at the end, because I'm sure that there are going to be specific folks that may have questions along the lines of how do I break into renewables given this specific background I have, if it's something that doesn't seem to fit into these bins or the types of roles that I've laid out already. So I'll just give some general advice here on looking to land a role in the renewable energy industry whenever that time comes. I imagine some folks on the line are rising senior, graduating seniors who are facing this problem right now. The number one thing I would say when we interview people is have some kind of a story. Really be able to answer the question, why do you want to work in this industry? I think if you can answer the question, why do you want to work at this company specifically, that's great. That's really icing on the cake. But the baseline is, why do you want to work in this industry? And I guarantee you will get that question. And make sure you have a compelling answer to be able to explain why. Because I think, frankly, a lot of times we see a lot of qualified candidates coming through, and often the thing that differentiates them is whether or not if there's a candidate who seems really committed to the space and to the industry and to developing their career in the industry, that's someone we know is going to take the work seriously. And it's especially good if you can kind of show us that story rather than just telling us. If there's evidence on your resume or experiences you can point back to that sort of show, hey, look, I went the extra mile to get experience in this space or to learn what I could about this space. I've actually put in effort already to understand this. That, again, is a signifier to a potential employer of seriousness. So to get concrete about that, I think CWC participation is great. We've actually, in the wake of last year's CWC, we hired a fellow that I met at the final judging for the signing competition. And in general, I was just blown away by the amount of stuff that people learned in their course of working through their CWC projects. I mean, in that judging, virtually everyone who came through that room essentially had what I would say is close to the level of experience that I'd expect from someone who'd been working within our company in a development role for 6 months to a year. I mean, they had learned a lot. And that baseline familiarity in somebody who's coming in at an entry level is great, because it's that much, they can just hit the ground running that much faster. So I think CWC participation, I would really put that out there. Like, it is a good resume builder for sure. And it's also a great networking opportunity, because you will meet people in the industry who are there and may have open positions or can help connect you to people. So that is a little bit of a segue into the networking piece. I'll come back to internships. Networking is really key. It's one of those things that is pretty awkward, I think, when you're still learning how to do it. It's certainly a skill that has to be developed. Personally, I've never been great at showing up to like a conference or an event with a lot of people and really making good connections that way. It's sort of real hit or miss in my experience. What I think works a lot better is a kind of targeted approach where, I mean, we're in the information age, right? Just you can stalk people on social media pretty well, so you can start getting a sense of places where you might like to work, or the types of roles you might like to do, and just reach out to people on LinkedIn that are in your area and say, hey, can we get coffee? Can I take you out for coffee as like an informational interview for 30 minutes? Just to chat. Just tell me about what you do and let me hear about it. And really treat it as a research exercise, because it'll help you learn more about these roles and get a sense of what you'll actually enjoy, right? Because that's a part of the problem is it is a broad industry and a lot of people want to break into it, but there's so many different roles, it's hard to tell up front, like, oh, which of these am I going to enjoy the most? So that research is valuable, but also by meeting these people and making these connections in a kind of low pressure way, I guarantee you a lot of those conversations are going to end, if you know your stuff, they're going to end with people saying, hey, I've heard of this role at this company, or hey, my company has a role open. So it's a good way to kind of get an entrance and kind of get your name in the door, as opposed to just being another resume in a pile of in a pretty big pile that have been submitted digitally. So that's really helpful, and I'd really encourage that. Internships are really great, both because they help tell that story. If you've got a relevant internship on your resume, it shows sort of commitment to being a committed interest in the space and to learning. But also, again, it gets you to know all these people in the company that you're interning at. We have got a pretty robust internship program at EDPR. I think, I want to say last year we had close to 50 interns. And our corporate headquarters is in Houston, so a lot of those positions are there, but we've had internships at remote offices in Boston and Indianapolis and Portland, Oregon as well. And it's not necessarily the case that we're able to convert all of those roles into full-time positions immediately just for sort of headcount reasons, but it's pretty common that would happen. So those are a great way to get experience and build your resume. Industry research, just again, kind of in an interview, if it really seems like you have taken the time, it's not necessarily that we would expect people who haven't worked in the industry yet to know all this stuff about it, but if you have taken the time to like read some reports and read some academic studies and kind of know the lingo a little bit and understand how like capital costs are figure into things and what's the typical cost to build a wind farm or a solar plant, that kind of thing. Again, it just shows seriousness, and it's really impressive in an interview, especially for an entry-level candidate. So, being familiar with the Lazard cost of energy reports, which are published by a think tank, but they're freely available, and like understanding what all that material means and the kind of general industry trends that suggests, that's a really great place to start. There's a guy named Ryan Weiser at the Lawrence Berkeley National Labs who puts out all kinds of really fascinating economic studies on renewables. You can kind of go and read I think he puts out every year the wind energy report for the year. I think he does the same thing for solar. That's a really dense report, but sort of reading the executive summary and being familiar with that and maybe picking out a few places of interest and reading those. Again, that will help you come across well in an interview. One caveat there, if you're going to pick up lingo out of those things, just be careful and make sure you're using it right. I looked at a resume a couple of years ago from a guy who used the word socio-technical like 6 times in his resume. And I had never seen that word, and I looked it up, and he was not using it correctly. So it didn't reflect well. So make sure you got the lingo right. And if you're not sure, just don't use it. And the last thing I'd say is just try to be open-minded. It's sometimes the case that the job you want to do ultimately isn't necessarily available right now. A lot of people in our environmental group, for instance, have moved into that space from development, and perhaps I don't think all of them had it as their ultimate goal, but some of them did. But the job that was open right now is in development, and development and environmental affairs have a lot of overlap. So they said, I'll get into development for now, and I'm going to keep my eye open on the environmental affairs positions, and when that comes open, I'll try to make a switch. And that kind of thing is really common, and it's a way for you to get your foot in the door. So again, if you're really committed to being in the space, being a little open-minded about the type of roles you're looking for can be helpful. So I guess briefly, I'll just end on some of the open positions that we have right now, because again, I know that some of you probably are on the hunt. We have some positions in project development, project developers, and project development analysts. I think we might have 2 or 3 open project developer positions actually. I think most of those are in Houston. We have a settlements analyst position, which is sort of an accounting type role that generally tends to feed into asset management type positions where you're managing these assets as like financial instruments and make sure they're performing appropriately. That's a really interesting line of work because you get to know all about like how they operate and how they tick. Origination analyst is a kind of power marketing and sales type role, kind of a lot of schmoozing and negotiating PPAs and understanding the like market side of these things. Project engineer, there's a couple of different prefixes on that one, but that's an engineering type role. If any of you go and look at that, I think you'll see it says 1 to 3 years of work experience, but I've confirmed with our engineering department that they would consider, and in fact, I think they're actually looking for entry-level candidates for those roles. And then the internships that I mentioned earlier. So there are quite a few. I'd encourage you to check out our website. Again, we're EDPR, and we've grown quickly and have a lot of open roles for folks that are looking to get into the industry. And everything I've listed here are entry-level roles. And that's just what is open right now. So I've been filibustering for a little bit here. I think that's a lot of information. I'll turn it over to the next person and happy to answer questions down the line.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Toby. That is excellent advice and insight into the industry, and I'm sure folks will have questions for you at the end. So with that, we'll move on to Garrett Parker, and I'll leave the floor to you.
Alrighty, thank you. And yeah, Toby did a great job kind of explaining what EDPR is and just general advice on how to get into the role. I guess where my experience kind of is a little bit different from him in this meeting is that I am a fresh alumnus from the Cal Maritime siting team. I started CWC in around this time in 2019. And so by the time that the competition had wrapped up, I had maybe like 5 months experience in the energy industry. I was a business major at Cal Maritime. So yeah, I don't know. My CWC basically like changed everything for me. I'm currently a project developer for EDPR. I thankfully got that job with the help of Toby. I met him at the CWC in Colorado. He mentioned that we had met after my presentation or after the presentation for Cal Maritime. And I had the chance to talk to him afterward, got his card, and things moved forward. I can touch on that a little bit later, but basically I've been with EDPR for 5 months now. I started with them in August, and I came in, looking from the outside in as a CWC participant, it seems like a lot of jobs in the energy industry, particularly wind, seem really far away. And like Toby mentioned in that project engineer role, sometimes it's listed that you need to have like 1 to 3 years of experience. And I found that the experience that I had in CWC would oftentimes, people would look past that expectation just because of the level of energy literacy that people generally have coming out of the CWC. I found that in my interviews with EDPR for my current role that same thing carried over, where the energy literacy that I had garnered from both CWC and something that Toby mentioned as well as just general industry research got me really far. And I think for that reason, I was considered over other people that might have actually had more industry experience. But I guess kind of an insight into what my day-to-day is in this role. The role as a project developer, as best as I can simplify it, Toby did a really great job doing an overview of project development as a whole, but I guess my day in, day out is that I'm basically helping a project manager coordinate all of our company's internal processes to make sure that we are meeting deadlines and expectations from both internal and external parties to get basically an idea into a wind farm that is beginning construction, which I know is very strange, but my role encompasses essentially doing something called prospecting, which is really what the CWC siting competition is identifying areas that have adequate wind resource, no obstructions of turbine siting, various different things, transmission interconnection, all this all of that stuff. That is all considered to figure out where an IPP would necessarily or potentially want to invest its time and its money into talking to landowners and seeing if we can actually build a wind project there. So that's like the prospecting side. I know that was kind of vague, and please, if you have questions about me not covering that, say them or bring them up later and I will be happy to answer. But it goes from prospecting all the way to, we have projects that are in 2020 operating dates. So we have a project down in Texas that is supposed to be finishing up this year. And so we are crossing off, basically like crossing our T's and dotting our I's and making sure that everything is being met. All the timelines are being met, people are being paid, all these little sort of intricate details that can halt the gigantic machine of getting a 100 megawatt wind project starting construction. So I'm, as a PD or project developer, often referred to as PD, I am assisting in all of those little ways. And so I guess my experience in CWC that contributed to me landing this job was sort of what I had touched on before. I came into CWC with pretty much zero energy experience. I was a business major, a senior at Cal Maritime, I think our program track at Cal Maritime had me looking at logistics jobs, and I had really no desire to pursue that path. And Ryan Storrs, who is tied into the CWC project at Cal Maritime, we had gotten in contact, and he asked me if I would like to be a part of the team. I said yes, and then it kind of all moved forward from there. I learned a lot from him, and that's actually a piece of advice that I can give to really anyone on the team is, or anyone across the various teams, is there are so many experienced people involved with these programs. Ryan Storrs and Tom Nordenholz being instrumental in my energy literacy and everything that I learned, and probably the reason that I was able to get the job that I have, because I learned so much from them and just their massive knowledge from industry over time. Beyond that, I would say that the things that I got out of CWC that really contributed to my my qualifications for this job were the fact that we not only spent a lot of time ironing out the LCOE of our project and the details of that, but we also spent some time getting creative on different project finance ideas, and that required a lot of research. And just that research, digging around the internet at like midnight on a Wednesday or 4 a.m. or something, just trying to come up with ideas on how to distinguish your project from the rest of the competition. Just by nature, spending time doing that, you're soaking up all this information that you probably wouldn't do otherwise, or at least I wouldn't have done otherwise. And it really helped me set myself apart, I believe. On top of that, I think one of the most crucial things that I've even run into in industry post CWC that Toby touched on was that Lazard LCOE report. Oh my God, that is perfect. I would study that, just become very familiar with its details, and that would give you a really good baseline to start from in your interactions with people in industry, or just networking in general with people that are in the renewable energy space. It helps a lot. And then getting the job. So we finished the CWC competition in early May. And after that, I mean, I networked with a few people at the competition and gotten some cards. But generally, I mean, looking for jobs post CWC, one of my biggest pieces of advice would be just stay open-minded. Like Toby said, I mean, I was considering everything from an internship with a local renewable energy incubator, like startup incubator. I was looking at IPPs. I was looking at a small microgrid in Northern California to work at. I mean, I was kind of my main goal, and I'm sure this will differ for everybody coming out of the CWC, but personally, my main goal was to just get exposure in industry. Because a lot of the work that you do in CWC is very significant and relevant to industry, but at least for me, I was personally seeking some kind of industry validation for the knowledge that I had, and I wanted some guidance and to really put my boots on the ground and go to work and be involved. And so I was considering everything. Luckily for me, I was able to speak with Toby, and he was actually my recommendation on my application. And I think that as a whole, and I mean, it was instrumental in me getting the job. And that's not to say that anyone involved with this program will be the one that gets you a job, but networking is everything. For me, I was looking at, there were renewable energy networking events around the Bay Area because we were near Cal Maritime is. I was going to like podcast recordings. I don't know if anyone is a fan of green tech media, but I was going to the What It Takes podcast recordings and volunteering to help set those up. And just by nature, you meet people at those meetings, exchange cards and tell your story. Again, kind of touching on on Toby's points, I had a story. I came from CWC. I was a fresh graduate, and I was really interested in the renewable energy space. So just don't put anything out of your scope, I would say. I used Facebook a lot. I used LinkedIn. I used Glassdoor. But there is nothing, I cannot emphasize this enough. There is nothing more important than just getting in front of people and putting out there your willingness to learn and your desire to be in the industry. And if you have that foundation of energy literacy and just understanding the project scope and renewable energy as a whole, things flow naturally. And for me, I mean, I want to say 4 months post CWC without really having any serious developments on the job side of me, on my job side. So don't lose hope. I mean, I have friends that I met in 2019 CWC that are posting LinkedIn job updates all the time that are just now getting jobs. Like, it's not going to happen immediately. I think I was very lucky. I think I got mine in 4 months. So I think that was quick. But yeah, just don't lose hope. There are jobs out there. Spend your time researching. Honestly, just pouring your lives into this project will help a ton. Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty much all I have, but I'm really open to questions at the end. I know I didn't cover a whole bunch, but I'd be happy to answer where I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Just
go ahead.
To jump in briefly. Garrett, I actually didn't realize that you were going to be a speaker today. Probably walked through it differently, but to be clear, Garrett's experience and sort of aptitude spoke for itself. You know, meeting me at CWC sort of got his foot in the door, but ultimately the reason that he got the job is because he was well qualified and because CWC prepared him well as well. So.
Absolutely. Actually, one side note that I forgot, just speaking to the open-mindedness, I applied for a couple different positions at EDPR, one of them being a project development analyst role. And I heard back about that job and came and interviewed for it. I found myself more suited to a project developer role, the analyst being a little bit more of a minute financial detail oriented role. And I saw myself kind of more oriented toward the broader project development role. But I came and interviewed for the analyst role because, again, speaking to that idea of me really wanting industry exposure. So I came to Houston and I interviewed for that role and I think did really well. But one of those things where it's just keeping yourself open-minded and taking chances. The interviewers that I was here with had kind of deduced that I would fit a project development role better, even though they hadn't necessarily reached out to me for that role. And that's how I ended up with the position I have now. So yeah, just re-emphasizing, keep an open mind, and pursue good opportunities when they arise for you. That's all I have.
Perfect. Thanks so much to both of you, Toby and Garrett, for giving your perspective on the industry, and lots and lots of great advice there. Really appreciate that. And at this point, we'll just open up the lines for anyone to ask questions if you have any on getting a job in the industry, or maybe words of wisdom from Garrett on any more words of wisdom on how to approach CWC. I think you guys were so thorough. Everybody's got all their questions answered on project development. The last slide I had. One more slide, just giving some suggestions about a handful of other other organizations in the U.S. to do project development. But yeah, I think a lot of the advice that both of you gave echoed the advice that we heard last week as well, in talking to the turbine OEMs, just those personal connections. And there's a lot of different ways to do networking that don't involve going and showing up at a huge conference, although that will be sort of the ultimate opportunity with CWC. But there are lots of creative ways to get in front of people that is probably a little less intimidating, that kind of separates out a few folks from the industry rather than just being an enormous crowd and not knowing exactly where to begin. And I think LinkedIn is a great platform to leverage to reach out to alumni and figure out what's available in the industry, to connect with other students, connect with other folks who've gotten jobs and ask questions, as well as, yeah, reaching out directly to alumni that have gotten jobs.
Do you mind if I ask a question real fast? I don't know, is the CWC LinkedIn little group, is that still being actively used?
It is, yes.
Okay, awesome. I don't know if there's a way to connect with other people that are in the group. I don't, like if there's a list or something, but I'm currently a part of that group. And so if anyone in the call would like to ask questions offline, or just, I don't know, have some one-on-one time, feel free to add me on LinkedIn and we can exchange contact information. I'll be happy to answer questions or give advice as I can.
Yeah, you should be able to search the members within that group and find you on there. All right, well, if there are no questions, then we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you again, Toby and Garrett, for taking the time to speak with us today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Of course.
Have a great day, all. Cheers.